people are not at their zone of genius or their level of purpose until it feels very, very uncomfortable. And I always put it in the context of like, you should feel a level of loneliness, right? Not alone, but loneliness. And what I mean by that is that when you walk outside or when you interact with people, you should feel like you are different. You should feel like the things that you're saying are almost crazy. If you're not putting in the effort and you think you deserve a handout at this point in life, like that's an average mentality, right? And if you're not growing or moving yourself forward and asking the right questions, you're going to find yourself, like you just said, Paul, below average, right? And that's what I'm seeing now more so in our millennial generation, more specifically, is we don't know what to do because we've been raised a certain way and there's a different way of living now, and we're having to unlearn a lot of things, and then try to take big leaps.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hi, I'm Paul Farranby, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where we learn how to become the most incredible versions of ourselves by learning from each other. Today, I have the honor of having Dr. Bryan McElderry on the show. He's a life and business coach, investor helping entrepreneurs and career professionals become thought leaders by monetizing their knowledge and mastering their overall life and achieving financial abundance. So that was just a little bit about what you do. I know you do a whole lot more. You can talk about the multiple businesses you own as well. But how about you introduce yourself the way you do, Dr. Bryan?
Yeah, Paul, thanks so much for having me on, man. This has been an honor. I'm so excited to talk to your audience and you, and for us to just have a conversation together. So, that little short intro, we all do those, right? Where it's these accolades where people, get a little bit like, that's interesting. But I always like to start off with, I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama, born and raised. That gives people some context. Was born in the same house. I can go back to the same home I was brought home in from the hospital now. I was fortunate. Both my parents, are still together. So I still have them in my life. So when people see this, person that lives in different places and had these doctorates and all this stuff, I really wasn't exposed to a lot of these things growing up. The only business owner I had in my family was technically my mother and my grandfather. They own an insurance company. And from there, I was brought up in the traditional route. So you go to school, you get your degree, you go get a job. And that's kind of how my story starts. And then it extends into where we'll probably lead into, which is, how did I part ways from this traditional pharmacist route and then get to, entrepreneurship, credit, finance? Like, that makes no sense. I was not an econ major, none of that stuff, but I have ascended into, one of the top thought leaders. So it's been really cool.
So that's really good. And I really like how you just put everything into context, that just where you are right now is not a reflection of where you started.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening or watching this podcast that maybe they have circumstances or their upbringing doesn't lend them into what they want to do. So I think it's encouraging for them to understand that, yes, like what you experience at the beginning of your life and through college does not dictate what you have to do for the rest of your life.
Exactly. It's so interesting that you say that, and maybe we can start, or I'll lead off again from that point. What I am hearing from a lot of individuals, especially those that are coming on to these types of podcasts, are like, what do I do next? The common trigger word is, this purpose. What am I supposed to be doing? I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. How do I shift? And it doesn't mean everyone's supposed to be an entrepreneur. It just means that when I say a thought leader, whatever you do, like you're doing here on this podcast, Paul, hopefully people are looking to grow in that area. So they wake up each day and it's like, man, like, how can I, be a better employee? How can I, ascend up the ranks? And they're looking for answers to those things. And a lot of us, millennials that grew up in a certain era, we're stuck in between because we were raised a certain way. And now there's all this exposure of AI and tech and online business and online information. And we're just like, which way do we go? Because I need to pay my bills and I need to stay on track. So,
yes.
I think that's the real big thing where I started is what do I truly enjoy to do, regardless of what anyone else thinks.
Mhm.
And that's where, I kind of led into some questions of where to go.
No, that's really good. They're just questioning things like what route you want to go and
Yep.
not feeling like you have to just do one thing. So I guess we start there because I know you said you went the traditional route through college, pharmacy school, which I don't know if that's completely traditional because I don't think a lot of people go into pharmacy school or to get a doctorate. I think you're in a smaller percentage of people that have a doctorate, but we'll stick with it.
Yep.
So is as growing up, was pharmacy being a pharmacist something that you wanted to do or like led to do? Like talk me through like what were some of your aspirations?
Yeah. So I was brought up and I was asked the question, just like many of us are, if you had, I know people, didn't maybe have the fortune to have, loving parents. And I always
Mm.
privy to that I just can't talk from parental upbringing like that. But my parents asked me the question, they said, hey, like, what do you want to do? And this
Hmm.
was, 10 years old or whenever it
Yeah.
happened. But um, I, our brains aren't evolved or mature enough to answer that question at that time because we're not exposed to enough. And I think it's the
No.
biggest detriment that's happening or that happened to a lot of us. So they asked me that question, and the only thing that I could come up with was, I guess I enjoy science. That was my answer.
Yeah.
So then when you pose that answer, they go down this rabbit hole. Oh, you can be the doctor of the family, and that's kind of how it stemmed. All puns intended.
Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah.
kind of stemmed there, where
Yeah. I love that.
they, I kind of went down this rabbit hole, and this happened at the age of probably like 10, going into middle school, where I started to like, okay, I guess I'm going to be, a healthcare professional. But a key part of that story is that I was a student athlete, like was one of the top
Wow.
athletes. I played football growing up. Football and baseball were my main sports.
Mm.
And, I was starting to get some interest from the high school level, in middle school, and they started to
Oh
recruit me
wow.
up and things of that nature. So that's just a part of my story to where I guess a young kid growing up, I'm like, man, I'm gonna go to a D1,
Mhm.
football scholarship.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to
Yeah.
Florida State, play for Bobby
Okay.
Bowden.
Yeah.
It was just it was a very interesting journey. So that's how I essentially started along the route.
Okay.
So from there, get into high school, and fast forward, I'm sophomore year in high school, and I finally kind of decide like, okay, it's time to decide to go to college and all these different things. So I go to a summer camp, or a summer medical camp at Georgetown University in DC, and I was exposed to the MD route, right? The
Okay.
physician route.
Yeah.
I saw blood. I saw, the realness of what it took. They told me it was going to be 4 years plus another four plus another three, and I said, "Wait a minute, I'm adding up numbers." I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good." So I come back home, and we explore a little bit more.
Okay.
It was one instance that happened that changed to where the pharmacy became real. I went to the pharmacy with my mother, and at that time, she was taking my grandmother, who had early onset Alzheimer's, to get her medications from the pharmacy. And I just couldn't forget how the pharmacist treated my grandmother and my mother, and it was just so caring and loving, and asking questions. And that was, no offense to pharmacy today, but it was a different time where the pharmacist had more time. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what exposed me. And they asked the question, why don't you be a pharmacist? So I started researching, and they said 4 years, potentially two extra, and you're making six figures. I was like, bet.
Okay. There you go. There you go.
So that's where it led to ultimately. And then I kind of pursued into the college route where I was already set for what I wanted to do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, so really that impact of seeing how the pharmacist was caring for your grandmother kind of
Yep.
really cemented the reason to go into it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It was just very, very wholesome to see how one exposure could change the direction. But from that standpoint, I matriculate into Morehouse College. At that time, I broke my collarbone in high school. In football, I was the starting running back. And another wrench in the story. I was playing golf at that time because my dad was in corporate America, and he was playing golf and got me and my brother into it. But I ended up going full in on golf and giving up all other sports, and that's where I was exposed to a lot of golf scholarships. So I
Oh,
was
wow.
getting D1, D2 scholarships for golf, which is another part of my story. And I end up choosing Morehouse College on a half partial scholarship because it's Morehouse, and I wanted to
Yeah.
be exposed to that. So I go there, I become a chemistry major, end up pledging Alpha, and yeah, it just started the pharmacy club there. Moved some people over from the medical profession, or people that wanted to go into MD, and they're like, man, pharmacy, I didn't know anything about it. I know you could do all these things. So that was really cool because there was no really pharmacy track at Morehouse.
Oh,
So I
wow. Okay.
created the pharmacy track and started that. And just exposed a lot of our students and my peers to the profession. And then applied to pharmacy school and went from there.
Okay. So Morehouse, yeah, you're just unlocking so many things. This is
See what
amazing.
happens, man? People bring me on. It's like, whoa, what's going on? I didn't know that.
No, I love it. That's the beauty of podcasting.
Yeah,
So to Morehouse, the partial scholarship, was that a golf scholarship
it
or a
was.
football? It was a golf
It was
scholarship.
a golf
Wow.
scholarship. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So are you still an avid golfer?
Oh, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, as an African American male, I mean, obviously back then it wasn't. Um, I had my instances to where you get the looks, going on private clubs and things of that nature. It was still happening when I was growing up, and um, you get to, a lot of these tournaments, and, we had an all black golf team at that time.
Oh.
And
Mhm.
some of my teammates now have founded a pretty big company, East Side Golf. So I've been, really
Wow.
cool to see, my teammates that we won a national championship with actually, go out and create something. And we're all doing really cool things.
Yeah.
But it has led me to be exposed early to a lot of opportunities. And it's really cool to see now, if you've noticed from social, like, that golf is cool now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
everyone's playing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, really now? Y'all playing?
Now you're playing.
Now you're playing. So
Yeah.
it's really tied into, a lot of things that I've done, the lessons I've learned.
Yeah, and it's been said that a lot of business deals go down on the golf course. So I'm sure
Oh, for
that
sure.
that has happened as well. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a good skill to have, especially when you're good at it. Which
Yeah.
I'm sure you are from being a D1 athlete. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
so that's impressive. So switching from this golf thing, I know you mentioned that some of your teammates founded companies
Yep.
or a company. I know you founded multiple companies as a
Mhm.
serial entrepreneur.
Yep.
To kind of talk to me about the transition from
Sure.
being a pharmacist to being an entrepreneur and then now serial entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, you get to pharmacy school, or you get to where you're going, and wherever you're going, and the audience is going right now, or wherever you are, there's the reality of what you think it is. And there's also a point where it's not all it's, chalked up to be.
Okay.
It's so I realized I couldn't help or serve people as much as I wanted to as a pharmacist. There was a lot of, things that I couldn't do. We can't prescribe, and they're still working on those types of things. So I get into pharmacy school, and I start asking the question, how can I help more? And that's when my first business was created, where I started to transform my own body. So I then went into fitness competitions. I did a
Oh,
national
wow.
or a men's physique fitness competition, transform my whole body naturally. And that's where the questions started happening, where if you're a business owner or aspiring business owner, whatever you're doing, when you start getting people asking, like, how did you do that? Whatever, just know you may have something. So I got asked, hey, do you create fitness plans? Like, can you write me a meal plan or whatever? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. How
Yeah.
much do you charge? I'm like, I don't charge anything. And they're like, you should. And that's where
Wow.
it came. And this was in 2014.
Mhm.
2014. So my first business was created in 2014, 2015. It was called Envision Health. Envision Health. And it was a holistic health coaching company, which makes a lot of sense now, which
Yeah.
will lead up into what I'm doing. But that correlated very keenly to pharmacy, to where I was helping people naturally get off medications, and it tied into the pharmacy route, and I was helping people so much that at a certain point I was able to essentially leave pharmacy. I told my supervisor at the time, after I graduated, I got a full-time offer from Target Pharmacy at the time, six-figure offer. And not only 6 to 7 months in, I was not making that amount, but I was making enough to cover myself, right?
Wow.
So you're talking about at that time at 23, 24, well, 26, 27 years old, making 4 to 5K a month consistently for about 5 to 6 months.
Wow.
At that time, right, in 2016, that was plenty enough to take care of myself,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So when people look at transitioning from places, people look at replacing what they're trying to do, and a lot of times it's not that. So that was my first business. I then matriculated into full time entrepreneurship. I did some odd end jobs. I drove Uber. I did retail stuff, just kind of picking up little things just to kind of make
Yeah.
sure I was good,
Hmm.
because I did not have enough time in pharmacy. People are like, why don't you stay in pharmacy and then do your business? You're working 12-hour shifts and you're exhausted, versus I don't have to use my mental bandwidth to go drive a Uber for make $100 and, just kind of pay some bills, right? I have my freedom, right? So 2 years of Envision Health, transition into life coaching. My clients begin asking different questions. They said, hey, like, how did you, same thing you're asking, how did you leave pharmacy? How do I do this? How are you so happy and fulfilled? And that's when I discovered life coaching, and I got certified in neurolinguistic programming, which is the art of communication, and how do
Oh,
you
wow.
shift people's thinking and ability to take action. So that's where the life coaching title came. That was around 2019, 2020. And 2020 came, obviously. And
Yeah.
that's when my business just absolutely catapulted. Like
Wow.
2020 was the biggest year of my business at that time,
Mm.
because everyone at that time was looking for answers. And when you have a sense of calmness and you
Yeah.
have the answers, they're willing to pay at that time for those
Yeah.
that had jobs and whatever. Um, so vision health, life coaching, and then to this point where you're asking, I've now created three essentially entities, right? Where McElderry Ventures is my biggest entity that houses my life coaching practice, and then my business coaching that I added on during 2020 when people were looking for business acumen and business advice and starting businesses. And then everyone was wondering, how in the world do I fund this stuff? And I know Paul's audience, and he was asking me prior to the episode just, about the art of credit. So I became
Hmm.
one of the, in my opinion, one of the top credit educators during that
Yes.
time. Um, just teaching people from a very simplistic standpoint on how to get personal credit and business. And then, just make it very simple, because it was always so complex. How do I get
Yes.
an Amex card very easily? And how do I start my
Hmm.
business? So that's when Alchemy Credit Solutions came.
Okay.
And that is the credit section of my businesses, where I do funding sequences and, just educate people on, how to maneuver things and questions that people have. And then the final one is Zaire Investments. That's my investment entity, where I started a Airbnb business during 2022, and my Turo business as well. And I know some people that are listening, they're like, all this stuff was hyped during that time. Like, what's going on now? But to summarize it, everything that I start, you always have to have an exit, right? Just like in investing, when you buy low, you sell high, right? So I knew that getting into Airbnb or getting into Turo, these weren't long lasting business ideas or models for me. It was the ability to capture something at the time, right? Look at it as a case study, educate people on it. And then people can say, Bryan, should I do it or not? And I can say, not the right time. I wouldn't do it. It was a moment in time, in my opinion, right? And now I've simplified everything. I've moved from Dallas to Vegas at this point. At the
Yeah.
time of this recording, I've been here about 2 months,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, it's been beautiful, man. I've simplified everything. Now I'm just coaching, running a community of 1,000+ people, and yeah, just investing. And I've simplified all the other business models, gotten rid of the Turo cards and the Airbnbs, and anything that has overhead that's very hefty, have simplified that. And now I'm here talking to you.
Yeah. Well, that is a lot to unpack. But
Yeah.
I really like how you, even where you started, like the envision health, like it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense based on what you were doing on the pharmacy side, like a lot of stuff on the health side. And what
Mhm.
you said when you were talking about it stuck out to me is when someone is asking you like how you're able to do something, then really asking those questions that you might have something there as a business proposition, idea, like scheme, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
Are you wondering what's next? Has everything you tried failed? Or maybe you just feel stuck? Then coaching might be right for you. The coaching relationship is a relationship totally centered on you. If you're tired of running on the hamster wheel of life and want to start to see results, reach out to IncrediPaul for help. So what are you waiting for? Go to IncrediPaul.org/coaching, IncrediPaul.org/coaching, or at I am IncrediPaul on all my socials. Or you can click the link in the bio for your free coaching session. I want to make sure you become the most incredible version of yourself. That you're able to lean into that. I think that's really key.
Yeah. It's been, I think a lot of folks, when they're looking for like what their purpose is, or if it's a business more so, and I know we want to get into the credit piece as well, but whatever you're doing right now, I can look at anyone, and I've talked to a bunch of people, and I can essentially support them or guide them or question them that whatever you're doing, you can do it on your own. It's just a protection mechanism.
Okay.
So when people tell me, well, I'm a consultant for a Fortune 500 company, I'm like, you can be a consultant for yourself. You can go get those clients at your corporation. The only difference is you've got that name behind you. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because you're operating in an entity that's already done the marketing and the branding and all these different things. But the skill set of consulting, that's you, right? So a barista, right? Like if you're the best barista at Starbucks, you can go get some coffee beans and look at how to develop coffee beans and start your own right coffee company. But people don't want to do it, but they love what they do. They're like, why? How am I not growing? I need to be paid more. I need to make more money. And the realistic piece of that is that you're just not, right? Because a business is operating underneath, rules and different entities and different ways of moving, and they've got to pay at a certain pay rate.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to be a 6-figure, 7-figure barista, you can do that. So it's just opening up and expanding your mind and what people want to do, and if they really want to do it. And if you can't decide if you want to do it, then you've got to be, unfortunately, comfortable where you are. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people are comfortable where they are as well. Or they say they are because they're afraid of stepping out, either way.
Yeah, exactly.
But I really like what you mentioned on just the whole idea is like, it's really the skill set that you have, whether you're doing it for a business or you're for yourself. And so I guess either for what you've seen or what you've helped people with, what is really the first step people should be taking when they realize that they have a skill, they want to turn it into a business, but they don't really know how to do it?
Yeah. There's 2 routes you can go down, or that you should explore, and you may have heard of them before, but it's the mindset and the skill set. That's the only 2 things that are separating people of where they want to get to. So you either have the mindset, meaning you have a dream and a ambition and a want to and a willing to, but you just don't know what to do because you haven't developed the skill. So
Yeah.
that's easy to find, right?
Okay.
But a lot of folks have the skill set, right? There are people that are with zones of genius right now, and they just don't have the mindset. But the mindset piece, as we know, is that woo-woo piece. Like, oh, yeah, I'll get to that.
Yeah.
It's like you're not going to excel with the skill set that you have if you don't uncover the traumas and the step backs and the the why am I hesitant? Why can't you make a quicker decision? Right? Why is everything got to be tiptoed around? Right? Oh, let me think about that. Right? Like the thinking about it, we process things internally. There's an instinctual nature within all of us that we already know what we want. Right? We go to the store and you tell someone, "Oh, do you like that?" "No, I don't like that." Right? If you want something or desire something and someone says, "Hey, like, what if I gave you the opportunity now?" And you're in a networking event and you're put under pressure and it's like, "Oh, what if I gave you the answer now and it costs $1,000?" You're like, "But you have that $1,000." Like, "Well, let me go home and process that and think about that." You already know, right? So when you're asking this question, the first place someone should start is discovering which one you have,
Yeah.
right? And when you start to getting closer, it does not have to be in perfection. That is where you should go. I always tell people to start if they want tangible things. The easiest business to start is an educational business, right? Start teaching people like what you're doing right here, Paul. Like start a podcast, start interviewing people. This is free game that people can get. Like, oh man, I'm gonna start a podcast and just interview my favorite
Yeah,
coaches and whoever,
exactly. Exactly.
right? That is the business model that I always recommend. That's why I teach that business model, right? Start sharing content, your ideas, and then start charging a fee for that, right? And the best fee model, in my opinion, right now is a membership based fee model, MRR, monthly recurring revenue model, right? To where you can see that every month someone's paying you $100 a month to just be a part of, and you only have to show up once, twice, whenever, right? So now your goal every week, every month is essentially to just get one more person,
Yeah.
right? And once you start developing that, you can start seeing the realism of $3,000 a month. If I've got, 30 people paying me $100, right?
Yeah.
So that is the realization of where I think people personally should start. And then it gets into the tangibles, which if you want me to go into that, the business of how do I start the LLC and where should I go? But yeah.
So you just dropped a lot of game right now. So I hope everyone who's watching and listening picked up on that, because that is, I mean, he dropped it for free, but could easily have charged like $1,000 for what you just dropped, which is between the mindset and the skill set,
Yeah.
which like I want to hone in on that because I think like you said, like a lot of people do have the skill set. The mindset seems to be, for when I work with people, I think that's the hardest thing for people to overcome is that
Yep.
they don't see themselves in it. And
Yep.
it's one of those things that I don't think anyone can really tell you. It's something that you have to like unlock on your own. Or have you experienced something different?
Exactly. Exactly. The awareness piece, Paul, is something like, man, we might have to do a round two.
Yeah, right.
No, but seriously, the awareness piece is where I always start with folks. So I know you coach as well and you help people as well. But a lot of people just don't know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's a level of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't know or you're not aware, the thing that you're looking for could literally be sitting in your lap. One of my favorite books that I recommend people always starting, and I recommend my clients starting, is called The Big Leap. That is one of the first books I read, and it talks about the 4 zones of to get to a zone of genius. Right,
Called The Big Leap.
The Big Leap,
The Big Leap.
LEAP.
Okay, I
Yep,
haven't read that yet. I have to add that to
yep.
my list. Big Leap. Yeah.
So just from the name of the book, right? You look at that and you're like, man, I'm trying to take like this massive action for my life, right? But I don't know what massive action means. Like, am I taking it right now? And really, people are not at their zone of genius or their level of purpose until it feels very, very uncomfortable. And I always put it in the context of like, you should feel a level of loneliness, right? Not alone, but loneliness. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is that when you walk outside or when you interact with people, you should feel like you are different. You should feel like the things that you're saying are almost crazy. So when I was like telling people I was like not a pharmacist anymore or practicing or didn't do anything, they were like, well, what are you going to do? That's how I knew I had something.
Okay.
Because fast forward, Guess who's all the people that are asking me questions now? All my former colleagues, right? Because you're ahead of the game. You're the forward thinking person. Um, so that is, those 4 zones are very important to where a lot of people are. There's incompetence, competence, excellence, and genius. And a lot of folks are operating in excellence, meaning they're just at their job and they're good at what they do. And there's a cap on that. So you could be the highest lawyer or the highest doctor, or you could be, whatever you're doing. And you wonder why you're still not valued, because you're just at a zone of excellence. There's however many other doctors. They don't care what doctor you go to. Personally, a lot of people don't. They're just like, I just need to be seen.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I'm saying? So that's where that lack of like respect for what people do now is hitting harder. Why you see people unhappy or unfulfilled, and they've got these letters behind their name, or they got to a company and they're like, man, this was supposed to be my dream company, and it's not what it was. It's because personally they don't care, right? They have to care, but there's another young 20-year-old that's looking to work at the top tech company too.
Yeah.
So it's coming right behind. So yeah. It goes so deep, man. And I'm excited for people listening to this to just question themselves. That's what you should be getting out of this podcast with us today, is just questioning, like, am I asking the right questions to myself? Right. And if I do that, I will start to uncover answers that I may want to hear and I may not want to hear. And if they don't sound crazy enough, or you start to feel a little uncomfortable, like, man, should I like change jobs? Like, should I move cities? Should I leave this relationship? Is it really serving me anymore? Like, that's where you start diving deeper. Do not dismiss those.
That's really powerful. Just the art of asking questions and asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot of times there's questions we know we should ask ourselves, but then we're afraid of what the answer is going to be. So we just don't ask ourselves those questions.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I guess we can tie it into this credit piece, or the financial piece, which is very heavy on a lot of people's heart centers right now because of the state of the economy.
Yeah.
And the question that people are asking are, should I invest? Should I, borrow money right now? Should I, do real estate? And there's a hesitancy because, there's a level of uncomfortable risk, right, that you have to take. But when I'm defining risk for people, there's risk with everything and there's risk levels. So when I look back on my life, I'm like, man, the age old saying, choose your hard.
Yeah.
There is risk within everything. If I'd stayed in pharmacy, there was risk, right? That I wouldn't have matured. I wouldn't have been on this podcast with you. I wouldn't have impacted as many people. Some people would not have any credit cards. Some people would not have the cars at a lower interest rate. And I just think about that impact, and probably you do as well. Like, what are you doing where you think it's safe, but you are actually limiting the ability to serve others? And that's risk.
Yeah.
So if you think going out on a limb and investing and putting yourself out there is risky, just think about all the people that are going to be going into their, latter half of their years ignorant because you didn't share the information, right?
Yeah.
Or you didn't step out and do X, Y, and Z. And that's how much power we each have. And if more people did that, then we wouldn't have this nuance of mediocrity.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate,
Yeah, no, it is so unfortunate. I like how you put that. The nuance of mediocrity is just that everyone just aspires to be average. And the engineer nerd in me says, like, how averages works is that you have people above average, you have people below average, and then averages in the middle. And there are a lot of people who think they're average that are actually below average. And it's like, I don't understand, like, why you would aspire to just be in the middle when you could be so much more.
Yeah. And the unfortunate thing and also the fortunate thing is I'm a huge advocate of capitalism at this point in my life, right? To where the work ethic that you put in, you should be rewarded,
Hmm.
right? And if you're not putting in the effort and you think you deserve a handout at this point in life, like that's an average mentality,
Yeah.
right? And if you're not growing or moving yourself forward and asking the right questions, you're going to find yourself, like you just said, Paul, below average,
Hmm.
right? And that's what I'm seeing now more so in our millennial generation, more specifically, is we don't know what to do because we've been raised a certain way and there's a different way of living now. And we're having to unlearn a lot of things,
Yeah.
and then try to take big leaps. And at this stage in life, a lot of our parents and elders, like they were chilling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're talking about 30, 35, like 40, like they were chilling. And,
Mhm.
the questions I get from people at this stage in life, even your listeners right now that are, in their mid to early 20s, like you've got to accept that things are going to evolve and they should. But also you've got to accept that there's different ways of doing things now. There's different ways of learning. The educational system, a whole nother conversation, is changing, right?
Yes.
And you've got to evolve with those times or you're going to retract.
Yes, evolving is so critical. Like with the rise of AI, like what
Yeah.
people want to accept it or not, AI is here to stay.
Yep.
Those that learn to leverage it and use it are going to be more successful to those that don't.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example there.
Oh my goodness. Oh, this is
Yeah,
going so many different directions,
yeah,
Paul.
I know.
But it's a good direction. I think that the takeaways that people have gotten here, from the credit piece, right? What would I advise if I were to try to give someone something here on this podcast and try to, that would serve them now, right? Because people are listening to this in a different time than 2-3 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And they'll be listening to this in the future.
Yep.
The times that we're in, I'm advising people, right? Not financial advice, not anything, but one thing you should not do is retract, right? Because an investor's mindset is when everyone's running, you run towards the fire. And it does not mean jump in the fire, it just means inch closer and then ask the right questions. So if everyone's telling don't buy real estate, don't take out any loans, don't do anything, yeah, don't, but ask the question and be prepared. Okay, well, when things shift and when things change, like which one would I do? Start, getting and gathering information. I know us in the STEM field, like we like to gather and research and get some R&D, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you've got to do that during these times because this is another time. And for those that don't know, I am a technical investor. That means I invest in the financial markets, as a trader, as a long-term investor, short-term investor, buying shares, all those things. So I'm a chart reader, right?
Yeah.
So
And you
this
trade live too.
I trade live, right?
Yeah.
With no fluke, no nothing. People can
Yeah.
see me give my entries, exits, all that kind of stuff, which
Mhm.
we'll talk about at the end for my community. But
Mhm.
this is a time where I'm looking at the markets and we're starting to get some retraction. So when you get retraction, guess what a lot of people missed because they were unaware during 2020, right? The big retraction that, happened and everything started falling in 2019, end of 2019, 2020, and people started panicking. They're like, I'm just going to hold on to whatever I have, which is cool. But what happened in 2021, right? There's cycles, right? Interest rates lowered like
Yeah.
crazy.
Mhm.
People are selling their cars from 10 years old at
Oh
profit. Like
man, that was insane.
it's a wild time. So I don't, fool me once, cool. But the
Yeah.
second time, no.
Mm-mm-mm.
So we've got to be prepared I know that things are tight for a lot of folks, right? Inflation is high, car insurance is ridiculous. Like and I see the comments, and which is why I haven't really posted on these things, because I'm just gathering information. I see the comments and people are like, well, people should be more financially responsible. Yes and no, right? Like, you're talking about a shift in an economy to where there's someone that should, in my opinion, be making a $75,000 salary and be able to pay a mortgage for a couple of grand and be able to have just a Nissan Altima, I don't care what it is, and be able to
Yeah.
pay a $300 note,
Mhm.
right? It shouldn't be this, oh, you got to be more financially responsible. Don't buy the car. Like, people got to try. Like, come on now.
Yeah, you gotta get
like,
around.
I'm like, come on now. Like, what if people are being financially responsible,
Mhm.
right? And that's when you lean into this notion of like, everyone shouldn't have to be an entrepreneur, right? This is an economical problem to where we have, people, just hardworking people that have skills, right? That should be getting paid what they're worth, right? In my opinion. But we have a lot of thought leaders, and I don't keep a lot of drama in my life, Paul. But I just want to challenge, because it's this notion that you need to go harder and you should do this, and you should be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, yo, come on now. It's There's someone out there that just wants to be a doctor,
Yeah.
but to be a doctor, to be a physician, which we need, there's someone out there that still
Mhm.
wants to be a pharmacist,
Yeah.
right? And to take out $100,000 loan and not be able to be paid to be able to pay it off, that's a problem,
That's a
right? And
huge
they don't have
problem.
any time to get a side job,
Yeah.
right? So you're
There's
talking
no time.
about like real things. So step number one, I would say someone needs to figure out their skill during this season, right? Figure out what your skill is. Number two, start an LLC, right? And you can get into S corps and all these different business models, but just start an LLC in your designated state. From there, start sharing your information via podcast, online, on stages. Like, just share it somewhere of what you're interested in, not in what you do, what you're interested in, right? Begin having people see what you do. Invite people, an invitation into joining a mailing list, joining a community for free. You don't even have to charge for it yet, right? And once you start getting people to get into a community, or you get their email or a mailing list, right? Then you can begin sharing and monetizing that, right? That is the matriculation that I would say right now for people. I wouldn't even say take out loans. I wouldn't say go out and get X and Y and Z credit card right now, unless you desire and you've never had them before. But that would be the simple thing that I would do right now. And then investing, that's a whole nother conversation
Yeah,
if you'd
it's
like me to go
a
into
whole
that.
nother
But
thing.
yeah.
And so it's interesting because you mentioned this did not go the direction I thought it was going to go, but I'm glad it did. I think this is the
Yeah.
direction it needed to go, because I didn't get to talk about it, but even how we got connected was
Yeah.
from social media through Clubhouse, that you were
Yeah.
just sharing about business credit and personal credit and
Yeah.
like the differences, all that stuff. I think that was like in 2021, and that was
Yep.
definitely the time for it. But
Yeah.
now the time is really honing in, understanding what your skill set is, building a community around it, and
Yep.
just spreading far and wide. So
Yep.
I think it's really interesting to see how you've evolved and how you've been intentional about
Hmm.
even consolidating your businesses and focusing on different things. 'Cause I feel like a lot of times it's really easy to get caught up in like, I've been doing this, I have all this time invested, I'm gonna keep doing it, run into the
Hmm.
ground, like it's on fire, I don't care, let's just keep doing it. But just to have the vision and the fortitude to know, like, I'm gonna pivot a little, I'm gonna focus on this is where I need to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Man, you hit it right on the head, Paul. I think there's a lot of people that are um, they're in something and they want to pivot, but they're staying there because it's either easy, or they have people that are relying on them, right? So it's very similar to the Blockbuster model, right? The Toys R Us model, the Radio Shack model. That's how I look at myself. So I never deemed, if you remember from Clubhouse, I never deemed that I was the credit guru. I just had a very high skill set in that. So when
I
people
remember
look at
that.
me and they're like, "Man, I wish Bryan would, share credit information again," or like, I don't see him sharing as much. Like, does he even do that anymore? I have the skill set, but is that what I believe my skill set in this season is that my higher like zone of genius. No. So if I'm trying to reach people at a deeper level, credit was just the entry piece, right? But if you notice from 2021 till now, a lot of the clients that I've helped, some of them have stayed and they've got the credit card. They're like, thanks, Dr. B, I got the credit card, man. And if I reach back out to hundreds of them that were in those clubhouse rooms, I guarantee you that they're right where they were. Because every time I mentioned a credit card, I said, man, what is your bigger vision? What are you trying to do? Because the points and the miles will shift. Those will always be there, and it will start to become normal for you to just travel for free or go to the
Yeah.
lounge. Like, that's cool. But
Yeah.
you're still at your job, or you're
Yeah.
still with your relationship.
Mm.
And that's where I think right now people are like, man, I just want to be happy and at peace. And that's what I've been saying this whole time. So when you said pivot, I've never been afraid to pivot because I serve the people or serve the notion of what I believe people should hear during that season, even if they don't see it or understand it. Right. I told folks, with Turo, I said, man, I will have an exit plan because those business models seem cool. Right. The Airbnbs, like I told people when I was going to exit. How did you know to exit then? I didn't know, but I just knew that it wasn't the risk to reward was no longer there.
Yeah.
The time wasn't worth it anymore. So that's how you know. If your time is start to be drained and you're frustrated and you're not seeing the return on investment and energy, got to pivot.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of leadership skills there, just like having the vision, just understanding where things are going and like being there first, it seems like, and then
Yeah.
having everyone else catch up to you.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think that when I'm speaking on podcasts or anyone, it doesn't even have to be a podcast. It's just interactions. Like I have a coffee meeting right after this podcast. My thought and first inclination is always like trying to see, the human being for the human being, not the human doing. So when I see people and hopefully people that are watching me or watching us together, and when I'm on my social platforms, hopefully you see that I'm like trying to really understand who you are, because the questions that folks ask a lot of times, I'm like, that's not the real question you want to ask. Like, Bryan, what's the best credit card for X, Y, and Z? I'm like, here's the best credit card, like for, groceries, go get the American Express Gold. We'll just change it a little bit. So go get that. Here's an easy way. I can get you a business credit card if you have a 680 and above on your Experian and you have no derogatories. Like, you can get a business credit card today. Remember when I said that in Clubhouse all the time? So once that's done, like, I want to learn who you are. And I don't know if it freaks people out or they're like, man, like, why does he keep asking? I just asked one question. It's because I just don't believe in transactional interactions. Like, I believe truly in transformational. Like, I'm a believer. So I believe God has put into me that, you're a transformative person, just like you are, Paul. Like one thing Paul did here is he never stopped asking me to be on this podcast. Right. And that told me so much about him that, I was so grateful to just say, here, I was on the couch filling out the form. Right. And I said, no, like, man, let's do it. Stop putting it off.
I appreciate it.
And that tells me so much, man, about the willingness to just keep going and asking for something that you desire. I'm not a hand holder, and I look at that with my clients as well. Right. I'm not going to come out here. Half of folks that watch me, and maybe even watch you, you already know what I do half the time. You already know if you've been watching me long enough, you already know that I coach. You just are fearful. Some people are, right? And I challenge people on this. And a lot of my clients have told me this. They said, Bryan, like, because you said that it's okay to say no, we got on a call. So there's an assumption and a presumption that I can't afford it, or that he's intimidating, or that I'm not good enough to be a client, or whatever it might be. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to ask for help, especially if I'm for my men out there. Like, we're
Oh,
very
yeah.
prideful,
That's a
and
huge
we want to
thing.
tiptoe around
Yeah.
and like, oh, let me join this community. Let me do this. Let me do that. Oh, let me just watch the free lives and see if I can get some game. The free clubhouse rooms. Like, it's that type of mentality a lot of times. And once you release that, like once you release the pridefulness of just like, man, I just need to I don't need help. I just need to get around some like-minded folks
Yes.
and just start asking questions.
Yeah.
Like, yo, what do you do? Who are you? Man, that's so interesting, man. Like, you mind if I, get your information or whatever? And, I respect your time, and if you charge or whatever, but can I ask a few questions to get me started? Like, when I hear those types of things, that warms my heart, because that means the person wants it.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, yeah.
No, that's so powerful. Dropping so much game on this podcast. But we're about out of time, but I want to make
Yeah, of
sure
course.
if there's anything that you haven't shared, either about yourself personally or
Yeah.
your business, or just any key tips that you
Yeah.
have the space to share.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Paul, for having me on, man. And
Absolutely.
we went over a little bit of time, so I do apologize, but
Oh,
I think
no.
that the overtime is a lot of times where the best moments are made, especially
It
in
is.
games. So
It is.
the final thing that I will just kind of address, and I always address on any platform that I'm on with someone, is that if you felt something today via Paul, myself, I'd first ask you not to just jump in and go. First ask yourself, like, man, like, I felt something, because there's an emotion that's attached to a decision you're trying to make. So if your hands are getting clammy, if you started to like go back in time, and if you close your eyes and you're like, man, like, he spoke to me, or Paul asked that question, and like, man, that's me. That's how you know that this was for you, right? So the final thing that I will say, once you do that, you're more than welcome to follow me on my socials, right? At Dr. McElderry, right? It's DRMEC, and it'll pull right up on all the socials. My website is bryanmcelderry.com. I'm pretty sure Paul will have everything linked. And if you want to join our community, you can just go on the website, enter your information in, and you can join the Discord for free. And then our Leverage University is a small monthly fee where all the game is given, everything that you want to learn from the business models, how I did them. I pretty much share everything in there. We live trade every day. All the new credit information, everything is in our Discord for a monthly fee. So, yeah, man.
Oh, awesome. I can already tell you're just a podcast pro, because I didn't even have to tell you to do any of that. You just did it on your own. It's like I was just going to step over. You could just run the podcast by yourself. So that was good. Yeah, it should have come up on the screen if you're watching. If you're listening, it'll be in the show notes as well. But no, Bryan, I really appreciate your time. Like we were talking about it, like you have a lot of things going on. Like you mentioned, you make the time for things you want to make time for. And I appreciate that. But just kind of summarizing, whoever's listening to this podcast, I think it's really good to know that where you are currently doesn't have to dictate where you're going to be in the future. Because what you were saying, growing up in Birmingham, going a traditional route, going to pharmacy school, having entrepreneurial desires, and then just stepping out and doing things that people thought were crazy. And you saying that as like, well, I'm going in the right direction. Not a lot of people look at things like that. But I think it's really critical that we talk about the questions and just challenging what you believe and challenging yourself and asking the right questions. Because as you do that, as you continue to grow, get around the right community, then you can truly be incredible. So hope you got something from Dr. Bryan's story, from all his stuff. Definitely recommend follow him on social, stay connected with him. He is a wealth of knowledge. Thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible. Incredible.